What's going on guys, Skid Gaming here. I didn't expect my other electric state tutorial to garner any sort of popularity, but I meet people in-game all the time who tell me that my video helped them get off to a good start. Those interactions got me thinking, what other helpful tips can I give newcomers to make them better at the game? Well, the only thing that came to mind was building tips, but there's only like 3 of those, and each takes a couple of seconds to convey. I needed something with more substance, more meat on its bones. That's why today, we're going to be attempting a full review of every firearm in the electric state DarkRP. I'll talk about each weapon, run through their stats, then demonstrate them using my makeshift range. Finally, I'll give my own opinion on their effectiveness and any pointers as I think of them. Without further ado, let's jump right into it, starting with the pistols. A true classic, the Colt 1911 is the oldest firearm still in use by the United States military. Suck it, Medusa. Its simple and timeless design has made it a popular choice of sidearm ever since, you guessed it, the year 1911. Its single-stack magazine, while detrimental to ammo capacity, gives the weapon a slim figure that makes it a favorite concealed carry option for many. The 1911 was invented at a time when this was the acceptable main rifle cartridge, not this. Therefore, this gun is chambered in 45 ACP, a larger, if slower round than the more commonly seen 9mm. The history and elegance of this weapon have resulted in a large cult following and endless debates on web forums. Now that we know about the real deal, let's check out its electric state counterpart. Being what most consider to be the starter weapon of the wasteland, the 1911 doesn't have the best stats. It has an 8-round mag capacity, takes standard pistol ammo, and deals 18 damage per shot. The low damage means that you'll need to land 6 hits on a healthy target to kill, which doesn't leave much room for error considering your tiny magazine. Although the pistol is semi-automatic, the fire rate is still relatively low compared to weapons like the Mauser and M16. The only fields that the 1911 really excels in are price and availability. The thing costs about the same as a can of vintage Bloxy Cola, and you can buy it from just about any gun dealer worth his salt. Plus, you get a free 1911 working as a soldier, if you can stomach functioning as the arm of a corrupt dictatorship. In the end, the 1911 isn't at the top of anybody's list, but if all you need is a gun on a budget, nobody's stopping you. The IMI Desert Eagle has been an iconic weapon in video games for 3 decades now. Featuring an unmistakable and imposing frame, this weapon is known for one thing and one thing only: sheer power. It weighs nearly 4.5 pounds unloaded and typically comes chambered in 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum, and everyone's favorite 50 Action Express. You'll note that the Deagle isn't often a standard issue weapon for the world's militaries. This is because it's almost entirely impractical. It's heavy, expensive, and doesn't have enough upsides to justify its use in favor of a smaller, more modular handgun. Coolness factor, however, has been the driving force for many of its sales. After all, who doesn't want to say that they own a gold-plated tiger-striped hand cannon? In the electric state, the Deagle is one of the more popular handguns, although its use has declined since the April 2020 update. It can still be found in many gun stores though, because any gun dealer can craft it with enough money and scrap metal. The Deagle boasts some impressive stats, with a 7-round mag capacity and dealing a whopping 35 damage per shot. It also takes standard pistol ammo, so you'll most likely never run dry. 3 hits to kill and only a slightly smaller mag capacity make this weapon a clear upgrade to the 1911, but with the improved capabilities comes a higher cost. The unit price of the Deagle is over 3 times that of the 1911, but many would argue that the charge is tame for such a high quality firearm. Personally, I think that the Deagle is a superb weapon that can hold its own against most enemies. The Mauser C96 is the oldest semi-automatic pistol on this list, having gone into production in 1896. This pistol predates the safety razor, air conditioning, and sliced bread. It's been used by such figures as Lawrence of Arabia and Winston Churchill, not to mention Han Solo, but is most iconically seen in the hands of Imperial German soldiers during World War I. So, how does a weapon with such a rich history measure up in this particular Roblox game? Well, the Mauser starts off ahead of its pistol brethren in the capacity department, holding 12 rounds of standard pistol ammunition. It suffers a bit in the damage department, dealing only 18 HP per hit. However, it more than makes up for this with its incredible fire rate, which is basically as fast as you can click. Or just activate an auto clicker and you've got yourself a dangerous little bullet hose. You won't see this weapon very often in the wasteland, as it requires a banker crate blueprint to craft. That's a real shame because the unit price is very low at only $875. Because of its rarity, this gun is viewed more as a collector's item than a viable weapon. Before doing the hands-on research for this video, I'd never actually shot one of these. However, after some range time and several violent outbursts, I've come to the conclusion that this is one of my favorite pistols. Does it beat out the Deagle? Maybe. The only way to find out for sure is to pick one up yourself and try it out. Snubnose revolvers, while not the most common firearm, have definitely seen their fair share of use over the years. A snubnose is defined by Wikipedia as a revolver with a short barrel, usually 3 inches or less in length. Many would consider the first commercial weapon of this type to be the Colt Single Action Army Sheriff's model, which featured a 3-inch barrel. These guns can be chambered in many calibers, but the most common ones are .38 Special, .357 Magnum, and .44 Magnum. When I think of this gun, my mind immediately goes to all those John Lennon memes. In the game, this weapon stands out from most other handguns by refusing to fire standard pistol ammunition. Instead, the Snubnose takes rifle cartridges, which would most likely result in a sizable fireball with every shot. You'd think that with these upgrades the enemy wouldn't stand a chance, but no. The Snubnose only does 30 damage per shot, requiring 4 hits to kill a healthy player. In typical revolver fashion, this weapon can only carry 6 rounds in its cylinder, so like the 1911, you don't have much room for error. The Snubnose costs the same as a Mauser at $875 per unit. Also like the Mauser, it requires a banker crate blueprint, so you won't see it nearly as often as the 1911 or the Deagle. Once again, I hadn't used this gun before doing research for the video, and I wasn't expecting much from the Snubnose. It proved to be useful, but not as useful as its equally cheap Mauser counterpart, or the USP for that matter. The USP, or Universelle Selbstladepistole, is a relatively new handgun developed by HK. It's found use in many armies and police forces the world over since its creation in 1993, notably the German Bundeswehr and the United States Department of Homeland Security. The gun comes chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson, 9mm, and 45 ACP. Interestingly enough, the USP in-game uses a Sig Sauer P220 model. Stats-wise, the USP is basically just a beefed-up 1911. It has the same ammo capacity at 8 rounds, but enjoys a higher fire rate and damage output, hitting for 26. An interesting feature about this weapon is that it has the only functioning flashlight of any gun, which in my opinion ends up being a detriment. You'll rarely need a flashlight in a firefight, let alone one that only illuminates 10 feet in front of you. This weapon falls somewhere between the Deagle and the Snubnose. It's basically a poor man's M16. We're not exactly sure which gun this is supposed to be, but the mesh is supposedly based on the Ranger Sequoia from Fallout New Vegas, which in turn is based largely on the Magnum Research BFR. The list of viable calibers is vast, to say the least, including 50 Beowulf? The BFR is a single action weapon, but its in-game counterpart behaves like a double action. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. It's a revolver. The cylinder spins, the bullets go boom, cowboy says yee-haw. Whoop-de-doo. Like its snubby cousin, the 45 takes rifle ammo and deals 30 damage per shot. It also carries 6 rounds at a time and features what seems to be a slightly faster fire rate than the Snubnose. One thing that makes this weapon stand out is the fact that it doesn't appear on your hip when holstered, making it the perfect tool for bounty hunters. Personally, I think that this weapon's handy, but also more trouble than it's worth to obtain. It's the only pistol that requires wooden planks and a black market dealer to craft, and it costs the same amount as a Deagle, while retaining the damage and capacity of the Snubnose. The Tech 9 is a pistol developed by Intratec, an American subsidiary of Swedish firearms manufacturer Interdynamic. It became popular in media for better and for worse, and it's had more than its fair share of run-ins with the ATF and California legislature. This weapon even has the honor of being one of the 19 guns that were prohibited by name in the 1994 federal assault weapons ban. It isn't manufactured to be an automatic weapon, but come on, no one cares about gun laws in the apocalypse. In-game, the Tech 9 is just a cheap force multiplier. It's basically unusable at medium to long ranges due to its poor accuracy and recoil, and its restrictive 16-round mag capacity makes it undesirable to many seasoned players. In addition, its unit price is greater than any pistol, and even some rifles. As far as benefits go, this weapon is much more accessible than most long guns due to the fact that normal gun dealers can craft shipments and it only requires a box of scrap. In the end, the Tech 9 may seem cool to have, but if you've got the money, I believe that there are better options out there. The PP-19 Bizon is an odd-looking weapon that was developed by what's now known as Kalashnikov by a team of engineers that included both Viktor Kalashnikov and Alexei Dragunov, both sons of legendary figures in the gun industry. Originally intended for counter-terrorism use, this gun entered service in 1996 and has been used by the Russian FSB, among other organizations. The most notable feature is this weapon's unconventional helical magazine, which holds 64 rounds of 9x18 Makarov ammunition. To date, the weapon has been largely replaced by its direct descendant, the PP-19 Vityaz. Vityaz? Vityaz. Yeah, I don't know. In the electric state, many players see the Bizon as a definite upgrade to the Tech 9. It has a 35 round capacity and deals 16 damage per shot. Even though it takes one more hit than the Tech 9 to kill a healthy player, its deep magazine more than makes up for its weaker punch. In addition to this, it has the exact same unit price of $1,625. Like the previous SMG, this weapon can be crafted by any gun dealer with the upgrade and only takes a box of scrap to make. Is this the best weapon? No. Is it the best SMG? Also no. But it isn't the worst either. I would pick this thing over most pistols any day of the week. Ah, the Thompson. Who doesn't love such an iconic weapon? A product of the First World War, this gun permeates the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. It was adopted by the United States military as the M1928 in 1938 and was developed as World War II progressed, eventually becoming the M1A1 Thompson we all know and love. No, I'm not talking about the gangster identity associated with the Tommy gun. Yes, I know the game calls it a Tommy gun. Look at it though, come on. Anyway, the Thompson was one of the most influential weapons of its time, so much so that it coined the term submachine gun. The concept of a compact weapon firing a smaller round would lead to many future weapons intended for use by officers, truck drivers, engineers, and plenty of other soldiers who weren't straight up infantry. This idea evolved into the personal defense weapon, a class of firearm intended to fill this particular role, but we are getting off track. Let's dive into the stats. The Tommy gun deals 26 damage per shot and has a magazine capacity of 25 rounds. Curiously, these are the same stats as the M4, but I'm sure that there's some sort of difference in accuracy or fire rate. They'd never make a cool new weapon just some reskin of the M4, would they? Nah. Anyway, with the improved performance once again comes a higher cost, and that cost is a $3,625 unit price. Like the Tech 9 and Bizon, the Tommy gun can be crafted by a gun dealer using a box of scrap. This weapon is obviously the best SMG and a good alternative to more expensive rifles. However, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who sells these. The UMP was developed by HK to be a cheaper successor to the popular MP5 submachine gun. It comes chambered in 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, and 45 ACP. It's found use with many federal agencies across the globe, except for in Germany? There really isn't much more to say about this weapon. It is called the Universal Machine Pistol after all. This weapon is only obtainable in-game if you're working as a soldier and the mayor's stone-cold heart is thawed enough that he calls in a supply drop for you. This weapon retains the same stats as the aforementioned Tommy gun, dealing 26 damage per hit and having a 25 round capacity. If you see soldiers toting the UMP, it probably means that they're in the mood to raid somebody's store, so keep your doors locked and your gun loaded. This is literally just a more modern looking Tommy gun. If you have it, that means you got it for free, so I wouldn't be complaining. Of all the weapons in the vast Soviet arsenal, nothing was more profitable than the Automat Kalashnikova model of 1947, more commonly known as the AK-47, or Kalashnikov. It's the world's most popular assault rifle, a weapon all fighters love, an elegantly simple 9-pound amalgamation of forged steel and plywood. It doesn't break, jam, or overheat. It will shoot whether it's covered in mud or filled with sand. It's so easy that even a child can use it, and they do. This is Yuri Orlov's speech in the movie Lord of War about the defining weapon of the Soviet Union, and the most popular rifle in the world. Who doesn't know what an AK is? Most people who play first-person shooters can spot a variant just by looking at its silhouette. The rifle is chambered in 7.62 by 39mm and typically features a 30-round double-stack banana mag. Everything there is to know about this weapon is on the internet if you want to read about it, so I'm just going to get right into the electric state version. The AK is probably the most common rifle in the wasteland too, being a highly popular choice of product for many black market dealers. It deals 26 damage and has a 25 round capacity, which is pretty common on this list. Spoiler alert, most of the rifles are very similar. Anyway, the AK takes 4 hits to kill a healthy player and costs less than the Tommy gun, with a unit price of $2,125. Anybody who has money owns at least one of these guns, and their availability makes them very common and relatively disposable. All in all, the AK is a good weapon. It might not be as flashy and cool as other automatic rifles, but it delivers the performance you need at the price you deserve. The M16 is an iconic weapon of the Vietnam era that evolved into one of the most popular rifle platforms in use today. It faced a lot of adversity in its early phase, owing largely to political and bureaucratic infighting between the US Army and other military branches, namely the Air Force. Once it was fully adopted in 1964, the M16 set the standard for NATO rifles to this day. A light weapon constructed largely of polymers firing a 5.56x45mm cartridge. This was a major departure from tradition in the 1960s, but today it's only conventional. In-game, the M16 is somewhat overlooked. Shipments can be crafted by any black market dealer, but they never seem to be in stock. For some reason or another, this rifle is always outsold by its more popular brother, the AK. This confuses me, because the M16 has a significantly cheaper unit price, and the semi-automatic fire mode makes it so that you can shoot as fast as you want. This gun deals 25 damage per hit and can hold 25 rounds of standard rifle ammunition, making it a 4-shot killer like most other weapons of its class. There really isn't much more to say about the M16. I personally think that's a criminally underrated rifle that could be handy for players on a tight budget. The M4 carbine is essentially an M16 with a shorter barrel and telescoping stock. It is currently the main rifle in use by lower enlisted across multiple US military branches as well as other government and police agencies. The weapon's shorter length makes it more convenient to carry and more effective in close quarters battle, although its range performance is lacking compared to a full-length rifle. While the original M4 came with semi and burst as fire modes, the M4A1 replaced burst with full auto. The electric state M4 deals 26 damage per hit and holds 25 rounds, making it a 4-shot kill. It has a relatively fast fire rate, beating out the AK's 6.5 rounds per second with 7.5, or so the wiki claims. Like the AK, this weapon is possible for every black market dealer to craft and therefore widely available. Its relatively high unit price means that many players see it as a higher quality weapon than the AK, and role players from NATO countries tend to go for this rifle instead of its Soviet cousin. The XM8 was an attempt by Heckler & Koch to salvage their Objective Individual Combat Weapon project. They marketed the XM8 to the US military as a potential replacement for the M4 and M16 on the grounds of the extreme modularity of the rifle. Barrels, handguards, and more could be easily swapped out to configure this weapon for different roles, like a carbine or a DMR. The project fell flat in 2005, and the rifle has instead found limited use in the Royal Malaysian Navy. Yet another tragic flop in HK's Kraut Space Magic line. Somehow, enough of these rifles survive the apocalypse that you can find wastelanders toting them in the electric state. The gun does 26 damage and has a 20 round mag capacity. Why, you might ask, would you want to buy a weapon that does the same thing as an AK with a smaller capacity and more than double the unit cost? That's easy, silly. You can show the rest of those mud-covered troglodytes how cultured and stylish you are. The FAMAS was invented so that France could have a standardized NATO weapon without having to buy guns from West Germany. It features a distinct bullpup design that has supposedly garnered a fitting moniker, the Bugle. This rifle boasts an unusually high fire rate at 1,100 rounds per minute. Most frontline weapons have a fire rate between 600 and 950 rounds per minute. The FAMAS F1 was adopted by the French military as their standard rifle in 1978, and has since been replaced by the improved FAMAS G2 in the French Navy. As of 2017, most French army units have traded out the F1 for the HK-416. In-game, the FAMAS deals 26 damage and holds 26 rifle rounds. It supposedly shoots faster than any other rifle, but then again, that information is from the same wiki that clocks its fire rate at 7.5 rounds per second, which might sound familiar from the M4 segment. The FAMAS costs the same amount as the M4 and is sought after by many players. Maybe it's a placebo effect? I don't know. In any case, it does require a blueprint to craft, so it's not quite as prevalent as some other automatic rifles. The G36 was devised as a 5.56 replacement for the legendary G3 battle rifle. Its largely plastic construction and floating barrel design have resulted in some complications involving long-range accuracy that stem from overheating. Even so, the G36 has been an iconic rifle in the video game industry and, until recently, was one of the few standard-issue European rifles holding the line against the spread of bullpups. In the electric state, you'll find that these weapons are exceedingly rare. This is because the only way to obtain the blueprint was through a limited time crate during Christmas 2020. I opened that crate dozens of times, and not once did I get the G36. I got the teleportation dagger, which was even more rare, on multiple occasions, but no, the weapon blueprint was too much to ask for. Anyway, the G36 does 26 damage and holds 26 rounds, just like most of the other rifles. The difference is, this one looks cool because it's got a laser on it. Who doesn't know about the timeless M1 Garand? This rifle was ahead of its time when it was adopted by the US military in 1936. It was chambered for the 30-06 Springfield cartridge and fired from an 8-round clip that made a very distinctive ping sound when ejected. Many of these rifles were manufactured for the United States and its allies during and after World War II, and they are highly sought after by collectors and history buffs today. Evidently, these things are still around in the apocalypse. The Garand has an ammo capacity of 8 rounds and hits for 40 damage. This makes it one of 6 guns that can kill a healthy player in less than 4 hits. People say that it's highly accurate, but I don't have enough experience using one to back that up. Overall, the Garand offers good performance, albeit at a higher unit price than similar weapons like the Deagle. The first lever-action rifle to grace the consumer market was patented by Colt in 1837. These weapons used a unique mechanism to load rounds into the chamber and to reset the hammer. This style of rifle was used extensively in the late 1800s and still remains popular with many hunters and sport shooters to this day. In the electric state, lever-action rifles are, in my humble opinion, highly underrated. Even though their rate of fire is relatively low, they can kill in only 2 hits, so if you had a buddy with you and both people fired at the same time, you could straight up end somebody before he even knows what's happening. Additionally, the very cheap unit price makes these weapons highly disposable. The only issue is that you gotta find someone to sell them to you in the first place, and they aren't all that common, due to low demand. If you have the opportunity to get your hands on one, I say go for it. The term varmint rifle, or varmint gun, refers to a small caliber firearm or pellet gun that's commonly used to deal with rodents and other small pests like rabbits and crows. They typically aren't used against other people, and for good reason. They're outclassed as a weapon by most guns available in the consumer market. That's fine though, because their purpose isn't hunting the most dangerous game. I'm gonna be totally honest with you, this is quite possibly my least favorite gun in the game. The only thing it has going for it is the fact that it's cheaper than any other rifle. Otherwise, it sucks. It only holds 5 rounds, like its big brother, the lever action. Also like the lever action, it's lever action, so you have to wait almost a second between shots. Unlike its brother, this weapon doesn't kill in 2 hits. In fact, it doesn't even kill in 3 hits. Despite the pop-up saying that it does 38 damage, it takes 4 hits to kill a healthy enemy, so it's actively lying to you and trying to convince you that you're hurting somebody more than you really are. Also, this weapon inherited the breech loading aspect of the lever action, meaning that the magazine is also fake, and you have to put the bullets in one at a time. If you haven't guessed it yet, I would not recommend that you pick this weapon up, unless you're planning on shooting a squirrel, or maybe a midget. The mesh of this gun makes it unclear what model it is. The wiki page claims it's actually a Mossberg, but I have no idea. Anyway, it's a pump action. Like the lever action, these weapons have been in widespread use since the late 1800s by private citizens and various police departments. They're easy to disassemble and clean, cheap to acquire, and they do their job well. Few weapons are as recognizable as the pump shotgun. In-game, the Remington is a bounty hunting weapon through and through. It fires 5 pellets at once, each of which deal 20 damage. This means that if you use it to shoot someone at point blank range, they'll become a fine pink mist. That being said, the spread of the bullets is pretty exaggerated, so your chances of hurting someone drastically decrease the farther away you get. If you can take someone by surprise though, you're guaranteed an instant kill. The Remington is a rare sight in the wasteland though. Not only does it take a black market dealer with the blueprint, it also needs heavy ammunition to operate. This means that public demand is relatively low compared to weapons like the AKs, so you might have to go searching if you want one of these. The Ballistic Fist is an item co-opted from Fallout New Vegas. In that game, it serves as a melee weapon, where punching an enemy triggers a point-blank shotgun blast from the barrels. It's considered to be a top-tier item that, when combined with VATS, allows you to take on powerful enemies with just your fists. The Ballistic Fist works a bit differently in the electric state. Rather than using shotgun shells, it takes rifle rounds, and instead of punching people with it, you shoot them like a Mandalorian. This thing is rather expensive to acquire, with a unit price of $6,375. It holds 15 rounds and fires 2 bullets per shot, effectively giving you 30 rounds. Each bullet does 32 damage per hit, though I don't think I've ever seen both of them hit the same target at once. Typically, this item is seen more as a fashion statement to show other players how cool and rich you are. This gun, once again, is based on a weapon from the Fallout series. In Fallout 4, the laser musket is a signature weapon of the Minutemen faction and can be used against various enemies due to its unique damage scaling abilities. The more you charge it up, the more damage it will do. There's no damage scaling in the electric state version. If you get hit with this, you'll be instantly vaporized, no matter how much health you have. This is the only gun that inflicts a one-hit kill every time, and its unit price reflects that. If you manage to find an inventor who's willing to sell you one of these for more than $23,000, then congratulations. You can now say that you own the most powerful weapon in the wasteland. It only holds one charge at a time and takes about a second to reload in between shots, so you could potentially do a lot of damage with this thing. Obviously it's good, but like the Ballistic Fist, the high cost of the laser musket relegates it to more of a status symbol than a weapon, because people are usually unwilling to risk losing in a firefight. Well, that's the end. This video gradually sapped my motivation since I started working on it on December 14th. Huge thanks to the people on screen. I definitely wouldn't have been able to make it without their help, whether it be through lending me their weapons or acting as human targets. Thank you, viewer, for watching this far. I hope you learned a thing or two and can make smart choices about your weapons now. If you like this video, do me a favor and leave a thumbs up. It lets me know that people enjoy this kind of content. If you're a fan of my channel, please subscribe to show your support. That's all for this time. Skit Gaming, signing out. Goodbye.